Hello, welcome to the Cine Pulp. In this video, I will tell the story of the movie The Last Days on Mars, released in 2013. But before anything else, I ask you to support my work by liking this video and subscribing to the channel, especially because we would like to reach 1,000 subs as soon as possible. Doing so helps us bring new and exclusive content to you. That being said, let's get to the story. In the Martian desert, we see Vincent Campbell and Rebecca Lane amid a sandstorm. They are trying to reach the mission's excavation site. Upon reaching the desired location, Vincent informs the astronaut, Kim Alric, who is doing the excavation, to finish quickly because they need to return to the base and prepare to leave the planet in 19 hours. However, Kim does not respond and continues her excavation. Everyone was eager to return home, although the journey back would be a challenge in itself, considering it would take about 6 months to reach Earth. When Kim finally enters the rover, she laments that they are returning to Earth empty-handed, as they didn't have enough time to accomplish anything significant during the mission. On the way back to Tantalus Base, Captain Charles Brunel urges them to hurry because they need help fixing the communication with the Aurora space station. Richard Harrington manages to restore the signal, but the power suddenly goes out. Later, Marko Petrovich asks Brunel to go to one of the excavation sites, claiming he needs to fix a broken sensor. Brunel reluctantly agrees but asks Marko to take Harrington with him and return before dark. Vincent, Kim, and Lane arrive at the base just as Marko and Harrington are preparing to leave. On the way to the site, Marko instructs Harrington to prepare the sample boxes and label them as M.A-14 microscopic anomaly. Kim decides to check Marko's workstation to find out why he wants to leave again. Shortly after, the crew finds an image of cavities in a rock. Lane notes that the cavities look like microbial perforations. Upon observing the sample under the microscope, they find signs of bacterial cell division. Kim notices that Marko did not want to share his discovery with the group because he wanted the credit for himself. Brunel contacts Harrington and Marko to declare the excavation site off-limits. However, Marko instructs Harrington to ignore what Brunel said. As Marko looks at the soil sample he just collected, the ground beneath him collapses and swallows him. Richard runs out of the rover to help him, but he cannot see through the hole because of the vapor. Brunel discovers what happened and, along with Lauren Dalby, goes out to rescue Marko. However, Harrington declares that Marko is dead. Dalby believes the astronaut might still be alive, so she tries to go down the hole, but Brunel stops her, fearing she might get hurt. Brunel and Harrington return to the base to get the proper equipment to recover their colleague's body, while Dalby stays at the excavation site. Shortly after entering the base, Kim asks Charles Brunel about what was discovered. Harrington says that Marko just died, and it is not the time to worry about it, but Kim suggests that it was all Marko's fault for violating the protocol. Soon after, Mission Control allows them to recover the astronaut's body. Before leaving, Irwin advises Charles to reprimand Kim for her behavior. He tells the captain that Marko's death is not his fault, but Brunel points out that any mistake made by the crew is his responsibility. Brunel, Rebecca Lane, Irwin, and Vincent return to the excavation site. While Dalby waits in the rover, she hears someone trying to enter the vehicle. She tries to warn Brunel over the radio, but he cannot hear her due to interference. When the team arrives at the excavation site, Dalby is nowhere to be found, so Brunel concludes that she disobeyed his orders and went into the hole to look for Marko. Vincent descends into the hole after tying his suit to a rope. As he approaches the bottom, he notices a microbial organism growing on a rock formation. He descends further but starts to have a panic attack. Thus, the others bring him back up. After Vincent calms down, he tells Brunel that he did not see anyone at the bottom of the hole. Irwin looks around and finds 2 sets of footprints that seem to be heading toward the base. The captain is perplexed because this could indicate that the others took the rover. The crew quickly contacts Kim and tells her to stay alert. When Harrington checks the tracking system, he sees 2 figures 50 meters from the base. While Kim tries to establish contact on the radio, Harrington goes to the airlock to let them in. On the monitors, Kim sees a figure staggering toward them. When Harrington opens the airlock, Marko falls to the ground, with a hole in his helmet. After removing the helmet, Richard recoils in shock at Marco's terrifying face. Marco grabs a power drill and uses it to attack Harrington in the abdomen. The astronaut falls to the ground but manages to trigger the alarm to alert Kim. Soon, Kim heads to the airlock but immediately flees upon seeing Marco walking towards her. Dalby, infected, soon reaches the airlock, but Harrington escapes despite his injury. Soon, Marco and Dalby catch up with Kim. Brunel arrives shortly after and finds the base in a chaotic state. Kim manages to escape and locks the two infected astronauts in a room. While Marco breaks the glass door, Brunel instructs Kim to put on her suit. The captain tries to reason with Marco as he exits the room where he was trapped. So, brother, if a lunatic's face is rotting and they keep walking normally, there's no room for talking. NASA needs to create an anti-idiot system to avoid hiring this kind of person seriously. Kim leaves the base after putting on her suit. Brunel runs to the airlock, but the zombie reaches him and stabs him in the shoulder before he can escape. The same thing happened to Julius Caesar. The surviving crew members disable the door to trap the zombies. Then the astronauts head to the hydroponic dome for shelter. Lane tries to treat Brunel's wound but realizes it's futile. Realizing his imminent death, the captain instructs the crew to tell his family that he couldn't stop thinking about them during the mission. In the midst of this, the captain suddenly grabs Erwin by the neck, so the other crew members try to restrain him. Brunel calms down and slowly loses consciousness. Before dying, he warns his subordinates that they will never see their homes again. Very comforting. Kim ties Brunel to the table, fearing that his body will reanimate since Dalby and Marco are still moving even after being exposed to the Martian atmosphere. Shortly after, they hear an explosion outside. Kim looks at the monitor and discovers that the zombies escaped the base after using an explosive to destroy the airlock. The crew cannot contact the space station because the communication systems are down, so Vincent tells the others that he will have to go through the underground oxygen system to return to the base and fix the communication mechanism. While Vincent crawls through the tube, Lane takes a blood sample from Brunel and discovers that he is infected with the same bacteria from the sample Marco collected. After a few minutes, Vincent panics, remembering past traumas he experienced at the space station. They always put the most claustrophobic guy in closed environments. It's impressive. Lane helps him calm down and tells Vincent to forget what happened to him on Aurora. And then he forgot, because that is how it works. Well, anyway, the astronaut manages to reach the main base and sees blood on the floor and walls. Meanwhile, Rebecca Lane realizes they might try using antibiotics to neutralize the bacteria, so she takes another blood sample from Brunel to see how it would react to an antibiotic solution. When they inject the solution into the captain, his body contorts, and he agonizes terribly. Rebecca assumes he is trying to fight the infection. When the corpse stops moving, Lane takes another blood sample and discovers that the bacteria are no longer multiplying. With this, Kim turns the solution into a decontamination spray to use against the zombies. It's quite interesting, this plot of zombies in space, because it sounds very trashy, and they manage to make it in a decent way. Well, Vincent manages to contact Aurora, but the power suddenly goes out before he can inform them about the emergency. Erwin realizes that the zombies are returning to the base because they can't break down the doors of the hydroponic dome. And then a plan is created. Unlock the door to lure the zombies to the airlock in order to attack them with the antibiotics. It seemed like a good way to try to stop them. One of the zombies enters the airlock and starts convulsing on the ground when hit by the decontamination spray. However, Lane discovers that the effect is only temporary because the bacteria started developing resistance to the antibiotic. On the way to fix the power, Vincent encounters Richard Harrington, who by this point was infected. He repeatedly strikes the zombie's head with a flashlight, but the thing doesn't stay down, so he runs back to the oxygen tube. Vincent asks Lane to open the panel, but warns her that he couldn't seal the tube on the other side. Therefore, before opening the panel, Lane instructs Kim and Erwin to put on their helmets because Vincent did not seal the structure. After pulling the astronaut out of the tube, Kim grabs 2 bottles of antibiotics and throws them at the zombie. Meanwhile, the others try to escape the dome but cannot open the airlock. Erwin notices that Brunel's corpse is beginning to reanimate, so he decides to lock the door, leaving Kim and the other zombie inside. The surviving crew members manage to open the door, but the zombie stabs Lane in the leg with scissors before they can escape. The crew heads for the rover as soon as they get out. Vincent injects an antibiotic into Lane, trying to slow the spread of the disease and Rebecca's full infection. However, the three soon discover they don't have enough power in the rover to reach the landing site. Erwin notes that they need to go on foot, but Lane cannot walk because of her leg injury, so Vincent suggests returning to the base to treat her. When Erwin points out that they have other options, it becomes clear that he wants to leave Lane behind because he assumes she might be infected. And she might indeed be. But the astronaut says that everyone could be infected since they didn't know exactly how the infection behaved. Regardless, Erwin reminds them that there is another rover at Marco's excavation site and notes that it still has enough power to reach the landing site. They head there, and at the excavation site, Erwin walks to the other rover. After entering the vehicle, he contacts Vincent and tries to convince him to leave Lane behind because he believes she is infected. Vincent refuses, so Erwin decides to leave alone. The zombies manage to track them, so Vincent and Lane drive the rover through a sandstorm in hopes of escaping them. The astronaut claims that they will have enough power to reach the landing site in the morning, after the sun charges the rover's batteries for an hour. Finally, the Aurora spacecraft departs from the space station towards the planet. In the morning, Vincent wakes up and hears a message from the station informing them that they are sending an emergency team to rescue them. Vincent tries to respond to the message, but the space station cannot hear him. He realizes that Lane left the rover, so he follows her tracks. Eventually, he finds her, but Rebecca asks him to stay back because she knows the infection is already taking over her. The astronaut runs to her, but Lane removes her helmet and suffocates to death. Shortly after, her body reanimates and attacks the protagonist. After restraining her, Lane asks him to kill her, which he reluctantly does by taking a rock and delivering the final blow. Moments later, Vincent sees the Aurora spacecraft approaching, so he runs to the landing site. Vincent sees three zombies heading toward the spacecraft, so he warns the Aurora crew not to open the spacecraft's hatch. Although he can hear them on the radio, the spacecraft crew seems not to receive his messages. Shortly after leaving the spacecraft, the astronaut hears them screaming in terror as the zombies attack them. When Vincent enters the spacecraft, he sees Erwin sitting in the cockpit. Although conscious, Erwin showed signs of infection, so Vincent tells him that he cannot let him go back home because they cannot risk bringing the bacteria to Earth. Erwin attacks him and manages to stab Vincent's helmet with a knife during the fight. Shortly after, while Erwin tries to pilot the spacecraft, Vincent grabs the knife and uses it against Erwin. The two fight again as the aircraft flies into space on its own. Vincent manages to finish off the infected and opens the hatch to eject the body. Later, he sends a message to Mission Control to inform them that the entire Tantalus base crew was infected by an unknown bacteria, and the rescue team they sent also perished. He notes that he does not have enough fuel to fly to the space station, but he has supplies that could last until another rescue team is sent. However, the protagonist considers that he might also be infected. Thus, he says he will perform a maneuver so that if he discovers he is infected, he can direct the spacecraft towards the Martian atmosphere, causing both him and the spacecraft to burn up in the process. Vincent ends the message, saying that he will await a response after the transmission reaches the recipient in 15 minutes. With that, the movie ends as the spacecraft floats in the darkness of space. Well, folks, that's it. A little piece of advice. Don't go to Mars because it always ends badly. See you in the next video, and goodbye.